US President Donald Trump threw his support behind Pete Hegseth, his embattled defense secretary. Trump has said any concern over his defense secretary's decision to share military attack plans inside a Signal group chat was a waste of time. Speaking to reporters on the White House South Lawns after the Easter egg roll ceremony, Trump said that he had full confidence in Hegseth.
Do you remain confident in Hegseth? Do you remain confident in Hegseth?
Oh, totally.
President Trump.
Why do you even ask a question like that? We have recruitments that's at an all-time high. The spirit in the armed forces is fantastic. No, great confidence.
President Trump, you share your message to
Secretary Hegseth using Signal to discuss those military plans.
Are you bringing up Signal again? I thought they gave that up 2 weeks ago.
There was a new report this weekend that he used it in a separate chat that included some family members.
It's all just the same old stuff from the media. That's an old one. Try finding something new.
The New York Times reported over the weekend that Hegseth had shared details about the strikes on Yemeni terrorist group the Houthis on the 15th of March, long before the strikes actually happened. This was in a second Signal chat in a group that included his wife, his brother, and his personal lawyer. 4 people who had knowledge about the chat confirmed this to the Times. But this is not the first time that Hegseth has found himself in a soup. The details of the attack were essentially the same plans that Hegseth had shared in a separate Signal chat that very same day. That group included the editor of The Atlantic magazine, Jeff Goldberg, who was added by one of the close aides of the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz. The decision to close ranks around Pete Hegseth comes even as Trump has so far been unwilling to fire any of his top officials, no matter what headlines they generate. This is a marked change from Trump's first term. People who had discussed the matter with President Trump said that he was determined this time around to dig his heels in, and he wanted to see Hegseth and others fight back. Trump has been adamant in private about not giving the fake news media, that he calls the fake news media, the satisfaction of seeing him fire one of his top officials in a scandal. In his first term as president, Trump had to fire everyone from his national security advisor to his secretary of state to his defense secretary multiple times. Hegseth, too, seemed to strike a note of defiance that Trump was looking for a clash with journalists at that very same Easter event. Hegseth lashed out at reporters and television crews as he attended the annual Easter egg roll ceremony along with members of his family. He dismissed the news of the Houthi airstrike leaks as one of those hit pieces that aired accusations from who he called disgruntled former employees. Hegseth said he had spoken to his boss, President Trump, and that they were on the same page all the way.
You know, what a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't give back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. And on hoaxes, time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter.
Trump and Hegseth spoke on the phone on Sunday night, just a few hours after this news story dropped about the Signal chat leaks. The president told Hegseth that disgruntled leakers were to blame for the report. He made it clear that he had the defense secretary's back. Trump then instructed his team to publicly defend Hegseth. So on Monday morning, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, went up on Fox and Friends, which is the same show, incidentally, which Hegseth used to host during his career as a TV personality. Leavitt insisted that Hegseth had not shared any classified information in both the Signal chats.
The president absolutely has confidence in Secretary Hegseth. I spoke to him about it this morning, and he stands strongly behind him.
The New York Times reported that Hegseth had disclosed sensitive details about the Pentagon's attack plans against the Houthis in Yemen. This was in a chat just on the very same day before the actual strikes happened. The chat group had been created to strategize about Hegseth's nomination, a nomination which he won very narrowly, with the Vice President J.D. Vance eventually ensuring that he put the casting vote which won Hegseth the nomination by a single vote, breaking a tiebreaker. Pressure piled on Hegseth after news of the second Signal chat broke. Earlier, he had been accused of a drinking problem as well as having sex with a minor, but that was overlooked by Republican senators who eventually voted for his nomination. But that's not the only problem that is haunting Hegseth. It is that many of his own, or at least those who used to be on his team, are now turning their back on him. Or worse, they are even questioning his ability to lead the Defense Department. On Sunday night, Politico published an opinion piece by a former Pentagon spokesman, John Ulyett, who had recently left the Pentagon. In that essay, Ulyett said that the department was in deep disarray under Hegseth's leadership. 2 other Hegseth employees have also left the Pentagon in recent days, questioning his judgment and his leadership. Prominent Democrats have also called for an investigation into Hegseth's handling of sensitive national security information after the leak of the second Signal chat.
My Republican colleagues must remember that they serve the people of this country, not Donald Trump's ego. They must understand that our troops sacrifice for our nation, not a wannabe king. And if Pete Hegseth doesn't have the dignity or courage to do the right thing and resign from his post, then Donald Trump must fire him immediately.
Trump has run a more determined White House in his second term. He has signed hundreds of executive orders which push his second-term agenda with breakneck speed. While he has had some wins on immigration, his trade tariffs and the back and forth around the tariffs has spooked the markets. One area where Trump has pressed on pretty steadfastly is backing his team to the hilt. After both Hegseth and Waltz were accused of leaking sensitive information about American attacks in Yemen, both men were given a clean sheet by their boss, President Trump. The Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, shared sensitive military information in not one, but 2 Signal group chats. But that was not the only worry for Trump in the last 100 days or so that he's been in office. The IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, which is the tax department in the US, has had 3 different heads in the span of the single week. A man from El Salvador who was living in Maryland, married to a US citizen, was deported by mistake because of an administrative error. And despite the courts asking the Trump administration to bring him back to the United States, they have refused to implement the order. And in yet another misstep, Trump administration officials kicked off a war against Harvard University, the oldest, most prestigious, wealthiest university in America. They sent a letter to Harvard saying that they had to comply with certain guarantees and certain conditions without which they would cut $2.2 billion in federal aid. Harvard now has decided to sue the Trump administration. While the chaos has not reached the levels that we saw in the first Trump administration, the mistakes, the miscommunications, the flip-flops have already started piling up in the first 100 days. There was an early run that Trump had, which was defined by a flood of major policy changes, and he managed to do that at record speed. Trump wants his 100-day agenda to stand out and to be groundbreaking, but he runs the risk of tripping over a few speed bumps along the way. Chief among them, his defense secretary's capability, or the lack thereof, in staying on in office.